It is truly the language of lending. I always knew the letters, MISMO, but did I really fully understand the power of MISMO before going through this process? I would be lying to you in the audience if I said, yes, MISMO touches every loan in the ecosystem every day, every hour, every minute. MISMO was created to build standards, particularly around data, but it's getting bigger than just data. It's starting to touch technology, and we'll talk a little bit about AI as well.
Welcome to Keys to Real Estate, where we explore the trends and people shaping today's housing industry. Well, today I'm joined by Brian Vieaux, the new president of MISMO, the Mortgage Industry Standards Maintenance Organization. Brian stepped into this role just days before our conversation that we had while he was at MBA Annual in Las Vegas. With more than 35 years in mortgage, banking, and fintech, he brings a frontline view how technology and data are transforming the world of housing finance. So we talk about the responsible use of AI, e-mortgage adoption, collaboration with regulators, and why every lender, loan officer, and title and settlement agent should care about MISMO's work. So let's get right to it with MISMO's Brian Vieaux. The presenting sponsor for this season of Keys to Real Estate is Closing Lock. Working in title, do you ever feel like you've got a target on your back? Every year, $2 trillion moves in and out of escrow accounts in the United States. Fraudsters are watching and waiting for one wrong click, one unsecured email, just one oversight. And then just like that, your client's life savings are gone. That's where Closing Lock comes in. Closing Lock provides title companies a secure, all-in-one platform to prevent fraud, protect funds, and streamline closings. Over 1 million home sales have closed safely without incident in Closing Lock. The fraudsters only have to be right once. Title companies have to be right every time. Closing Lock has your back. Visit closinglock.com today to learn more. Brian, welcome to Keys to Real Estate. Thanks for joining us. You're out at MBA.
I am. I'm in Las Vegas at the Mortgage Bankers Annual Conference, and I'm on day 5 in my new role at MISMO. So glad to be here with you.
Well, that's terrific. Thanks for carving out the time. You are stepping into this new role as president of MISMO. It's kind of a transformative times for the housing industry. So I'm wondering what drew you to MISMO in the first place, and then what are your immediate priorities?
So what drew me to MISMO? A little bit about my background. I'm a 35-year now career mortgage banker. The first, call it 28 or so of those years was in mortgage banking proper, production management, origination. So very much a hands-on, street-level view of the consumer loan officer engagement. So that was the balance of my early career. And then a little over 6 years ago, I had an opportunity to lead a fintech startup in the mortgage technology space, a company called FinLocker. And so I did that for a little over 6 years with no intention of doing anything different. And then in the spring of this year, the president role at MISMO was put out there. And I had a few conversations with folks that kind of said, would you ever think about, those were the opening lines, would you ever think about what would it look like if? And I kind of was taken aback a little bit. I'm like, I've never thought about like an association, industry-wide association role. And the more I thought about it in terms of what I've done in my career, where my career is, I'm probably closer to the end of my career than the beginning. And this just really interested me in a way that if I wanted to and I needed to, I could have gone back into mortgage origination and done that. But this is an opportunity to give back to an industry that's really been great to me and my family. It is a transformational time in housing finance in a whole lot of ways. I think what is going on in AI specifically is really interesting. And I think MISMO can play a really key role in helping shape responsible use of AI in mortgage banking. And of course, with any models, AI included, if your data's bad, you're going to get bad output. And so that's kind of what we're all about is data standardization. So all of that kind of really got me excited about this opportunity. And I'm super fortunate, blessed, and happy to be in this role serving this industry.
Well, you're right. It is a super exciting time. And people who interact with MISMO directly, get it. They understand. But we have a lot in our audience that don't. So can you give us the 2 minutes on what MISMO is and what it does and how it's shaping the mortgage ecosystem behind the scenes?
Yeah, so I'll be the first to admit that inside of the last year, and certainly for the last several years, I always knew the letters MISMO, and I actually knew what a few of those letters stood for, but did I really fully understand the power of MISMO before going through this process? I would be lying to you in the audience if I said yes. I understand MISMO touches every loan in the ecosystem every day, every hour, every minute, but it is truly the language of lending, if you think about it that way. And so what is MISMO? We're the Mortgage Industry Standardization Maintenance Organization, which is a mouthful. And MISMO was created to build standards, particularly around data, but it's getting bigger than just data. It's starting to touch technology, and we'll talk a little bit about AI as well. But MISMO is a nonprofit that exists serves the industry, and is served by the industry. So MISMO as an organization, we're small. We're a small team. We're a wholly owned subsidiary of the Mortgage Bankers Association. I don't think a lot of people understand that. And why that's important is while we're a small team of 7 or 8 people in MISMO proper, we have access to the resources of the MBA and its team. And so that's important. We have obviously access through the MBA to members of the MBA, which puts us in the room for a lot of important conversations. And so when we talk about the importance of MISMO and why people should understand it, and this is a point that I want to really focus on, is even loan officers, the folks that face off every day with the consumers that we all serve, need to understand the power of MISMO, why it's important, and why they should be paying attention inside their own companies, how they leverage MISMO. Because there's some pretty interesting benefits for loan officers, I believe, if they lean in to the MISMO talk track, if you will. Let's just put ourselves out there as a loan officer for a minute. Every loan officer is their own brand, right? They're their own brand in their physical and digital community, and they have to stand out from their competition, other loan officers, other lenders, other banks, credit unions, mortgage brokers, you name it. And so as a loan officer, especially in this age of the expectation of a highly digital experience for the consumer, especially younger first-time homebuyers who have this expectation that everything can be done on this little computer that we carry in our pockets. If I was a loan officer today, I would be leaning into MISMO, and I would be telling the world that I am part of an organization, part of a company, and in my own business practice, I leverage the standards of our industry, which helps protect consumer data, which should give consumers comfort in the privacy of their own data and how it's used. And so I think there's an opportunity for loan officers to start to lean in to MISMO. That'll be part of what I will do in terms of building awareness and educating the broader industry on its impact. And then if you think about the tech stack, the technology that lenders leverage and use today, not just the loan manufacturing technology, right? Point of sale through servicing, but there's a whole set of technology that's used up funnel early when they're engaging in marketing and doing business development activities that leverages a lot of consumer data. And the standards can be very helpful there. And so if you're a lender that has and leverages tools that help educate, engage, prepare home buyers before they're ready to apply, and you're doing that using a lot of consumer permission direct source data from that consumer, how cool would it be to not have to ask the consumer for all that information again when it's time to apply, and you can just kind of pass it right into your manufacturing process. And that's where MISMO plays a role in that as well. So, a lot of people think MISMO and they think of the Fannie 3.4 MISMO compliant data set, the 1003, the loan application. That's one artifact that MISMO has created and standardized out of hundreds. So there literally is not a loan that gets produced in the ecosystem that does not leverage some or multiple standards created by the MISMO team.
Well, and I love that you focused on sort of that sales and marketing and efficiency side of it, because I think, having been around the industry for quite some time now, for me, when I've talked about MISMO in the past, people think it's something just for the propeller heads. It's all bits and bytes and bleeps and blops, and it's not for the business side. And I couldn't disagree more. Yes, there is very technical work going into how things are moving back and forth and what the container names are. Yes, there's some deeply nerdy stuff going on, but also sort of the vision for the product management really needs to come from those end users who are trying to have better sales marketing ratios, deliver a better customer experience, talk about the importance of data security, data privacy, and how it's all being handled. I love that you're putting that forward because that's a piece that gets too often overlooked, I think.
Yeah, and if you think about the mortgage finance industry as a whole, right, all channels, all cohorts, all participants, that role of loan officer, you can argue with what the actual numbers are. There's somewhere around 100,000 licensed loan officers today, or that's the projection for maybe what we're going to end up with and how many will renew going into 2026. And I've spent a lot of my career in that audience, if you will, and especially in the last several months as this led up to my joining MISMO, I asked a lot of questions and talked to a lot of people. And that's a group collectively, again, they know the letters, they see the letters on their Fannie 3.4 MISMO compliant data set when they're pushing a loan application through, but they don't really understand it. And I've always thought that the more educated a loan officer is on their entire business, the better they're going to show up to their consumer, the more likely they're going to build trust with that consumer. And that trust will lead to loyalty, referrals, and a hopefully lifetime customer relationship. And MISMO can play a role in building that trust and comfort for loan officers with consumers.
I've never heard it said like that. I love it. I think that's super compelling. Hey, we get a lot of questions about the adoption rates of e-notes and e-vaults and smart dot standards. And I'm excited to talk to you about AI, and I want to be sure and do that in the time we have left. But before that, let's back up. What's your take on where are we stand with that, and where do you see evolution coming there?
Yeah, so you're going to get a little theme from me on these types of topics, because when we talk about adoption of anything, especially as it relates to the origination of a mortgage, which the closing is the culmination of origination, right? You could argue that most of that adoption gets teed up at the point of sale between the loan originator and the consumer. And so I believe that the loan officers that set expectations with their consumers early in the process on what that process is going to look like, and in this case, that's going to lead to us doing a fully electronic closing, blah, 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 right? And this is why it's important to you, consumer. It's going to be less friction. It should be less costly, right? There's all kinds of benefits to the consumer. We generally, as an industry, on some of these type of initiatives, have looked at the benefits just inside of our walls as originators, and we haven't translated it into consumer benefit, which is why we don't have consumers walking around asking questions like, do you do electronic closings? They don't ask those questions because they don't know.
It so that it doesn't get echoed back as an ask. Preach it, brother. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, everything adoption-wise starts with, again, that point of sale, consumer experience, setting proper expectations. It's probably why we still haven't seen massive adoption of digital asset verification, because we as originators don't do a good enough job setting the expectations for why that's important, why it's actually safer, it's more secure than handing a stack of your bank statements to somebody that you just met.
Yes, exactly.
You'll hear that coming from me in terms of a general theme. It's all about educating and building awareness across our industry to why these things are important, which I believe will lead to more adoption. And just yesterday, in a handful of meetings with some of the great MISMO partners in that space, we talked specifically about how to collectively tell the story using case studies and helping people understand why this is important and why people should be doing this on every loan that they can.
Listen, for the 15 years I spent on the tech side of this world, I couldn't be giddier to hear that is high on the list of priorities, because we've had this capability for so long. And you're right, we haven't either understood and quantified our own demand properly. I think we were a little over indexing on the risk side of the equation, frankly. And so that kind of kept our demands tamped down, because there was a little bit of it's not broke, so let's not try to fix it. Yeah. And then you coupled that with that we didn't generate any demand from consumers, and consumers tend to be held a little hostage. They're just like, I just don't want to screw up my green light. So they're not going to proactively ask, and everybody's just sort of in this collective breath holding phase. And then, but when we get together, we sure express our frustration that we're not further along in this. So that is music to my ears. I know music to the ears of a lot of this audience. And I think that would get us at least sort of up to what consumers' expectations are. I agree with you. They're unvoiced expectations, but they're there. It's just you walk in and it feels like 1955 from an experience standpoint, and not so great. So if we can get those fundamentals bricked in, which we'd all be happy about, now let's talk about AI. Where does this go? Where can we go?
Yeah. My opinion on AI, specifically in housing finance, the mortgage industry, is I like to use baseball references. We're in the first inning, and I actually think we're in the top of the first inning. So AI and ML and models of all sorts have been around in our business forever, right? You could argue that, can't argue, it's true. DULP are a form of a model, right? And so, again, I think a lot of focus when it comes to AI in mortgage is on the mortgage manufacturing process proper, and then specifically probably on the decisioning of a loan. But there's so much opportunity, and this is where I get excited about AI, and I'll bring it back to loan officers again. I'm watching and seeing and talking to a lot of loan officers that have gone all in and embraced several different AI type tools at the top of the funnel. So loan officers that have built their personal brand in their digital and physical community, and you have to specify now their community is both physical and digital. You and I are having this conversation on a digital platform that is going to be seen by millions, I think, if I've looked at all your downloads. Right. It's just as important for loan officers to show up digitally as it is physically. It's where people check you out. If they are introduced to a loan officer, the first thing they're going to go do is look at them on the internet, typically on social somewhere, and figure out, is this somebody that I can like and trust? Watching loan officers leverage AI tools to scale their ability to communicate and show up, that's an exciting thing. And I think where MISMO and where the MBA in particular can play a role is to help build some guardrails for the responsible use of AI, because there's some risks. People don't understand how to leverage AI. I'll give you an example of a conversation I had about 4 weeks ago with a loan officer in a mastermind group that I was part of. And this particular loan officer was bragging on how they were leveraging different AI tools, and then went on to say, I've been taking credit reports that I run on consumers and running them through ChatGPT. All the sirens and bells and whistles and flags went off. And I'm like, no, that's not the responsible use of AI, right? So they didn't know, right? And so that's a pretty descriptive example, but it is an example of what can happen out there if there aren't guardrails and people don't understand the risk.
Well, and some proprietary tools to that illustration, if they had their own proprietary tool created and paid for by their organization, that risk wouldn't have been there, A, and B, that's part of the fear in it. You can't just tell people don't do everything because we don't have a policy yet. Organizations have to get on this because their people are doing it whether they realize it or not in some not okay ways.
Yeah, totally. There was a session yesterday where Brooke Anderson Tompkins was talking about that exact point. He asked the room, how many in the room have a policy for AI usage for their staff? And then specifically for your biz dev, sales, and marketing teams. And so just because you have a policy doesn't mean that people are going to necessarily follow it, but you got to start with a policy and you got to start with education. And so again, that's where I think MISMO can kind of play a role to help organize these thought leaders to create some standardization around these guardrails. And then we kind of opened with this comment and topic. Any model that you use that leverages data, the output's only as good as the data that goes in. And so again, I think we can help play a role in creating some data standardization to ensure that we've got good data going into these models to have the best output coming out. Because ultimately what we would want to see happen with AI in the loan manufacturing process is trust the output, not just at that point in time in the process, but all the way through the process, and not have to check the checkers and recheck the checker who checked the checker, which happens so often today in our process.
I would assume that originators, and everybody along the way needs to be also concerned about the ownership of that data that is going in to train the model.
Right.
I see that as sort of the next huge discussion point of our time of whose data is this and what pot of goulash has it been put into? That one's huge. And it's not just our industry that has to figure that out, right? That's everybody.
Everybody's figuring it out. I do believe, again, that our industry happens to be very early in this process, and so we should be able to leverage some of the industries that are a little ahead of us in terms of developing best practices. But
And ironically, I think since we're so highly regulated anyway, that's going to actually help us start from further down the path than would be if we were a lightly regulated or not hardly regulated industry.
exactly right. And that's another area. I'm glad you brought up the regulation aspect. If you're a non-financial institution, specifically a non-federally chartered financial institution, so you're an independent mortgage banker, not only do you have federal oversight with the CFPB, that could be another topic for another episode in its entirety, but you're also subject to your state or states if you're licensed in multiple states. And so another thing that MISMO is involved in is in partnership with the CSBS, the Association of State Regulators. Basically, we have a virtual workshop on December 3rd that is open to all, and we encourage all. This workshop will have members from the CSBS. It will have representation from the tech vendor side of our industry, and it will have lender representation. I think we're over 250 people registered so far.
Great.
And this is centered right now around the MCD, the mortgage compliance data set. And so my simple brain kind of thinks of it this way. If I'm a multi-state lender subject to multi-state regulation, today, when it comes to audits and oversight, I typically have to build my data to hand off to the regulator based on each state's checklist, if you will, right? And so, again, if you're a multi-state lender, you probably have at least one full-time employee, maybe multiple full-time employees that just manage the gathering of information for these audits. And so one of the opportunities we have with this workshop, with this working group, and specifically with the MCD initiative, is to bring all of the regulators together with all of us in this process and create a standard that can be created once and used multiple times. When we talk about the cost to originate a mortgage is somewhere north of $11,000 today, all those costs of compliance and oversight are part of that cost. And so this is a real opportunity for the industry to collaborate with the regulators to build something that actually takes cost out. And for originators, this also should reduce risk for them by creating some uniformity in how they organize their information and data as it relates to audits and the regulatory oversight.
Well, and I'm glad you're working jointly with them because, yes, having them help build the process up front is only going to help with our acceptance and adoption coming out of it. So that's great. And I know in talking with the regulators, they're also leaning into this. They're very curious about, we want these efficiencies. We want all that it entails. We just need to make sure that we're comfortable with what's going in the black box, right? So it's a great time to engage. And it's a great time for you, I think, to be at the helm because, if you'll allow me, again, I love how you're able to talk to the business side, the operations side, and realize that practical expression that comes from all this kind of, yes, nerdy, it can get very weedy talk. But if you don't, if you're on the business side, if you don't take part in that up front, you get stuck with whatever somebody presumed you needed, and it's not going to be the right fit. So helping shape it, tailor it here on the front end instead of just shaking your fist at it when it comes out of the oven is critically important. And I love how you're able to share the relevancy of that.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to share this. Again, I'm on day 5, so I still don't know what I don't know, but I'm a quick study.
I can't wait to see where we're at a year from now when you've had 360 more days to work on this. We hope you'll come back and give us some updates. Thanks for taking the time to check in with us from out at MBA. I'm glad you wore your jogging shoes, and be sure to stay hydrated out there.
Thank you so much. Great to be on with you.
That was Brian Vieaux, new president of MISMO, sharing how standards and data integrity are reshaping mortgage lending from the ground up. And his message is clear. These aren't just technical changes. They affect how we build trust with consumers, protect data, and make sure real estate transactions are more efficient for everyone involved. So to learn more or get involved, visit mismo.org. Their site is linked in today's show notes, and there's also a link for how to sign up for the virtual workshop Brian mentioned. And for more conversations like this one, head to octoberresearch.com or subscribe to Keys to Real Estate wherever you listen. From everyone at October Research, thank you for joining us today. We'll keep working hard to make sure you have the knowledge you need to maintain your competitive advantage.